In today's program, we are diving into the fundamentals of cleaning, what it really means, how it's done correctly, how it's maybe not done correctly at times, and what happens when that occurs. From basic principles to advanced healthcare protocols, we'll explore how cleaning connects to safety, infection prevention, and trust in every environment. This conversation will help clarify the science and systems that make cleaning work. And by chance, if you're joining us for the very first time, this is part two of a four-part series. Down below in the video description, we'll show you a link to part one so you can catch up. So at this time, it's my pleasure to welcome back to the program John Howell, Brandon Beyer, and John Harp. Gentlemen, please introduce yourself when you start to talk and answer some of these tough questions we have for you today. But it's great to be with you, and this topic today is a good one. So if you're ready, let's start with you, Brandon, and get started with the question that we'd like you to cover for us. Can you break down what cleaning truly means and what it involves at the most basic level, and include information on this cleaning wheel that you've talked about before?
So, Brandon Beyer, I'm a technical manager within the ingredients and specialties side of Univar Solutions. Uh, and I got to be honest, Jeff, it's the art of cleaning. It's a bit self aggrandizing. Everyone just calls it cleaning, but we're going to call it the art of cleaning just so I can feel a little bit special. And the cleaning wheel isn't my wheel. This is often called center circle. It's been around circa 1960s. People see many different iterations. Is really an intuitive understanding of what cleaning is, whether it's in medical device reprocessing, laundry, dish, floors, car wash, and it's blending mechanical action, temperature, time, and chemistry. And a lot of these times when you see the chemical wheel or center circle, water's at the center, right? That's the universal solvent. So breaking it down, it's combining these four things, these four elements based on the equation to deliver whatever you define as clean for your application. And the great thing, what we're going to dive into today, is around the use of enzymatic usage, because it really enables all of these elements. It can reduce time. It can reduce temperature. You can use less water. You can reduce less. You can reduce the amount of mechanical action. That's a big deal because people's time and people don't necessarily want to scrub and scrub and scrub. And there are really great demos to show this, which is another wonderful part about enzymes. It's not just lip service. We have methods, we have demos that can show these things actually do what they do to help drive that cleaning wheel forward. So, can we just call it the art of cleaning? And it involves mechanical action, temperature, time, and chemistry. In this case, the chemistry is most likely going to be predominantly enzymatic.
Well, let's take a vote. John and John, can we call it the art of cleaning?
We can call it the art of cleaning. Absolutely.
Thank
Brandon,
you.
you're welcome. All right, very good. So, John Howe, let's go to you on this question and talk about in healthcare how the medical device reprocessing works. Dig into the details there, the steps.
I'm John Howell. I'm Global Business Development with Novonesis with a focus on use of enzymes for medical device reprocessing. And to answer the question, we gave a little bit of a background on this in the first session that we did, but just to recap with a little bit of, cleaning it up a little bit. Medical device reprocessing is essentially what happens to an instrument after use on one patient prior to use on the next patient. So after the use on a patient, typically point of use is some kind of pre-treatment where it could be a just removal, a wipe down, or removal of the gross soils. It could be a pre-treatment spray to ensure that nothing dries out. Then that instrument will get eventually transported to a specialized department where they will do basically kind of some visual inspections, make sure there's no damage. But then two main steps really are cleaning, which is an absolute critical step, followed by disinfection or sterilization, depending on what is being cleaned. And really, once it is disinfected and properly disinfected and sterilized, it could be packaged up and stored for subsequent use on the next patient. So that in a nutshell is what reprocessing it is. It really is the cleaning and the disinfection of that device before going into a next patient.
Okay, going to stick with you, John, on one more question. With all this in mind and thinking of our first segment, why is cleaning, I'm sorry, the art of cleaning so critical?
Yeah, so that's a really important question to ask because organizations such as the CDC, the FDA here in the US, and the World Health Organization, they actually provide guidance for medical device manufacturers on steps and things they should consider when cleaning their devices. Like, how do they have to clean their devices? Device manufacturers have to prove that. And then medical detergent manufacturers may sometimes lean on some of this guidance in order to help them design their detergent and how does their detergent effectively clean something. But one thing all of these organizations will state is that cleaning is absolutely a critical step prior to disinfection or sterilization. And they say that simply because if you have, you go through cleaning, which as Brandon talked about, you're removing soils, you're getting rid of soils. If you don't remove some of those soils and an instrument is still contaminated with some proteins, fats, carbohydrates, a mixture of them, or even a biofilm, those can act as actually a protective barrier, harboring and protecting organisms, sometimes very dangerous pathogens, from ultimate disinfection or sterilization. So if you don't get them clean and the biocidal steps, disinfection or sterilization, are not efficient enough, then what happens is they get stored. They have viable or still living organisms on the instrument. It gets used on the next patient or a subsequent patient. And then that patient is now at risk for acquiring a healthcare acquired infection or being infected with these organisms. And in some cases, maybe a round of antibiotics is fine, it'll take care of it. But in some cases, it is not enough. And a patient can end up with a long-term healthcare acquired infection. And the emotional, mental, and physical toll that can take on a patient is immeasurable. So it is really important that when these instruments go into this facility, this department, they are adequately cleaned in preparation for those biocidal steps.
I'm going to say I don't want to go to that hospital, John, where you just
I would have
described.
to agree with you. I would want to go to a hospital that is doing everything by the book.
Yes, this is such an important topic. John Harp, let's go to you on the last few questions and tie it all together for us with this. If the art of cleaning, you're welcome again, Brandon. If the art of cleaning is critical and we should focus on it 100%, I think we agree with that. It's important. What causes failures in this process, in the cleaning?
So my name is John Harp, and I'm part of the technical service group in Novonesis, supporting John Howell, supporting a medical device reprocessing business, as well as other business units in the company. And so to your question, what causes failures in cleaning? It does boil back to what Brandon mentioned around that cleaning wheel. So there are a variety of circumstances that can cause failures, but really issues in time, temperature, a lack of mechanical action, or even the type of cleaner that's used can all cause some issues and failures in cleaning. And so when it comes to a couple of these scenarios, I'd like to walk through them with you. The first one really comes down to something that John Howell mentioned, which is in around of that point of use pretreatment. So if we don't have adequate pretreatment, the instrument could dry. And if and the soil on that instrument could dry. And if that happens, it's going to make subsequent cleaning much more difficult. So that is one of the first things, any delays in that process. The second one is if instruction for use is not used as prescribed. If you're skipping steps, you're handling it inappropriately. Some of these devices, like endoscopes, are very complex and they have complex geometries and tiny tubes. And or if these are not handled correctly, you can get compromised cleaning occurring. So chemistry matters. The type of detergent that's being used, whether it has enzymes that are being used, can all matter. If you're using the wrong concentration of those cleaners, or the temperature is wrong, or the contact time is wrong, each of these can cause failures. And so you want to try to avoid these, and you want to try to do it in the best way possible, which includes mechanical action. You want to be able to get into these tubes or on the equipment to make sure that you're not underbrushing, that you're flushing them well enough, that when you put these instruments into an ultrasonic bath, as an example, that you're not overloading that piece of equipment. So that way you can get as much action on these piece of equipment as possible. And so by following the appropriate instructions and using the correct cleaning wheel process, you can reduce that residual soil, reduce any redeposition or inconsistent outcomes, and ultimately avoid any cleaning failures.
We keep coming back to that cleaning wheel, that center circle that Brandon talks about frequently. So it sounds pretty basic, but we're forgetting it, it sounds like.
You
Uh,
know, just to add to that, Jeff, like it's just intuitive. The second you sit down with someone,
mhm.
we all clean in our homes, right? Well, hopefully we do, or maybe you've dodged that part of the chores, but I think everyone has an intuitive understanding. So it's just reapplying it again and again and again and makes it very simple. I mean, John put out a really good example of endoscopes. There's no real good way to provide mechanical action to those tiny capillaries. There's not this like market of very small filaments that you can scrub, and you can't see it anyways, right? It's a soil layer that's invisible. So you really need to lean in to the chemical solutions you have or the ingredients you have in your formula to do that work to make sure it's clean. And that's where places like enzymatic usage really change the game.
John's comment about letting product dry out caught my attention because I know in the past when I've cleaned something, when something dries out, you have to start over. You have to reapply product and start from step one because just adding water to that didn't work, at least in my instance. But thank you, John.
No, and connecting it to home, what people call
Yeah.
baked on soils. And not necessarily baking on, what might be blood or tissue within the medical device reprocessing space, but that is a concept people at home would understand. But yes, once it dries, it becomes much more challenging. Save yourself the headache, start the process, write it into your SOP, and use the right ingredients for the problem at hand.
Good advice. John Hart, back to you. We're talking about these failures in cleaning. How are they detected and measured? Any information there you'd like to share?
Yeah. So there's a number of steps that can be followed to ensure that equipment is uh, processed correctly. And so when with each piece of equipment, with each of these SOPs, there are these instructions for use that contain a pretty nice overview of how to actually assess a product, make sure that it's clean. So you need to have these steps in place so that way you can ensure that failures are caught. A lot of this will include a visual inspection, just looking at the instrument to see if there's any issues associated with it. So carefully inspecting is very important to catch failures. There's also a number of different surface detection technologies that can be used, such as protein detection swabs or ATP, which will look at the microbes that are present to see if they're still there, and that help you sort of understand if there's any residual soils present. And then, of course, making sure that there is routine inspections of washer disinfectors or your ultrasonic baths or other instruments or other equipment that's used to clean your instruments. And then, probably the most important piece is to make sure you document just about everything. If you're starting at the beginning from pre-treatment all the way to the end, you can then start to look for trends. You can start to look where issues may arise. So that way, those areas can then be inspected very, very specifically to catch failures. And to spend a little bit more time on this instruction for use space, you want to make sure that the point of use actions are documented. This is at the bedside, making sure that those steps are captured. Because again, if material is dried, that makes it difficult. So making sure that the point of use actions are captured is important. Making sure that if an instrument needs to be disassembled, that those actions were taking place. Making sure that correct brushes, if you're going through illuminated devices, making sure that flush volumes, all those parameters are explored when it relates to the lumens of devices. So that way you can catch failures. And there's a number of things that you could also do. But the name of the game is visibility, transparency, and being able to then explore according to the IFU for each of these instruments to make sure that you can catch any of these failures. Because as John Howell mentioned, again, a device that is not free of soil, that is not cleaned well, that means that it cannot be disinfected or sterilized well. So all of this is connected, and a lot of just process goes through to make sure that these failures can be caught.
Good information, John. Appreciate that. The final official question before we do closing comments, back to you. I know John Howe talked about the infections that could come from equipment that's not maintained, cleaned well,
Mhm.
with the process breaking down in some places. And those are the hospitals we want to avoid, which we've talked about that. But what are the other consequences, real world consequences when cleaning fails add on to that conversation.
Yeah, sure. I will do that. So I think the first thing is, maybe sometimes we don't have the luxury of avoiding hospitals. So if we can make sure that all hospitals are following the appropriate procedures, using the best technologies to get at to the services to make them as clean as possible, that's where we want to be. We want all hospitals to be safe and the patient outcome is as high as can be. But if cleaning does fail, we recognize that the organic soils that may be left behind on these instruments, as John Howell mentioned, that they can shield microbes, that these biofilms can remain behind, and unfortunately, this could mean that the effectiveness of disinfectants or sterilization processes are not as robust as they need to be. And so, by allowing these microbes or these organic soils to remain behind, it could actually just impact the device itself by causing the corrosion, or it could be that the critical mechanisms, the moving mechanisms, can jam up. And so being able to clean them as best as possible can just keep your instruments in the best shape that they can be, because sometimes they're super expensive. But it also, and more importantly probably, is that you reduce your cross-contamination. You then eliminate any possibility of surgical site infections or anything else that could be really bad for patient outcome. And so, again, you just want to prevent these issues by making sure the appropriate processes are followed. You want to make sure that the correct cleaning solutions are used. We're sticking to that cleaning wheel and making it as run as smoothly as possible. So that way we can ultimately get the best sterilization and disinfection as possible to keep things running efficiently and to make sure that when a patient goes into the hospital, they leave the hospital in even better shape, and making sure that we're there with patient safety in mind.
Okay, let's do some closing comments. If you'd like to add anything, maybe for those watching this program right now, decision makers, what you would like to see them do. John Howell, let's start with you. We'll go to Brandon, and then John Harp will wrap up. How's that sound?
Sounds good. Yeah, just to wrap up, I mean, I think we've talked about how critical cleaning is. And cleaning, the number one thing for any healthcare facility is about the patient, right? The care they receive, the environment they're in. And oftentimes the device reprocessing may not be something that is highly visible to people, but it plays an incredibly important role in what healthcare facilities do. And infection preventionists, that's their whole thing, is how do we make sure that our patients aren't exposed to infections, whether it's coming from the environment, air, linens and textiles, or surfaces, to even the medical devices. And as John spoke about, it's such a critical step that everything is followed by the SOPs that are designed by the hospitals, that the medical device manufacturers give great IFUs or instructions for use on how to clean their instruments, to the detergent manufacturers following their instructions for use, following all the protocols, making sure all the equipment is running efficiently and effectively. All of that is going to play a role in ensuring that when you go in for a procedure and you're having an instrument used on you that has been used on a previous patient, that you are safe and that you're going to walk out of that hospital the same as you walked in, hopefully better, and whatever has been repaired or fixed, but you walk out safe from any kind of infection. A lot of critical things that go on there, and a lot of parts starts with cleaning.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what John just said, I mean, we're portraying this cleaning element as serious, and it is. If you miss a stain on a shirt, it's very inconvenient, but the consequence of failure of cleaning is low. This is a hospital environment. People are at their most vulnerable, they're most worried, they're most concerned. So it is serious. That being said, we don't want you to be afraid of it. And if you have questions on how to explore this place, how to get into formulation, how to improve your process, you have a whole team of technical support or cleaning artists. Thank you for honoring the art of cleaning phrase behind you. Myself and my team, the Johns here, and there's a whole crew of surfactant, chelant, enzyme suppliers, and formulators behind us that can help you make the best possible solution.
So, I mean, in essence, we know that soils can be very complicated when you're talking about a patient that's undergoing a procedure. The soils from that procedure are inevitably going to end up on instruments. And so by using the best cleaning product available with the best enzymes available, we can get the best clean available to make sure that our instruments are ready to get back into service with the most confidence. And so ultimately, that's what this is about, is that you want to get the best clean, to get the best patient outcome. And there isn't too much more to say about that. It's a pretty standard process with a very technical and complex but effective cleaning products that can be used.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. I know this is part two of a four-part series. We're going to dig deeper into cleaning, deeper into using enzymes, and deeper into your expertise to help the healthcare industry, everyone working in it, do a better job.